former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is with us. Sir, great to have you back. Let me start first with this issue about Biden. Biden comes out at this hastily called news conference. You saw it, I saw it, and he's mad and he's furious that Special Counsel Hur pointed out that he didn't even remember the year he became vice president, when he started, when it finished, on numerous occasions, and that he didn't even remember within a few years when his son died. How in the hell dare he raise that? His words. Frankly, when I was asked the question, I thought to myself, it wasn't any of their damn business. They never asked.
Well, look,
he brought it up on his own.
On one hand, you have a president who they say is too senile to stand trial. Well, on the other hand, they say he's perfectly fine to run the United States of America. Those two things can't make sense at the same time. But I want to point out something, Sean, which is that we have known about Biden's senility and mental frailties for a long time. The fact that the mainstream media and even the Democratic establishment is now picking up on this signals to me that they are getting ready to move him out of the way. And precisely because Donald Trump is on the path to mop the floor with Joe Biden this fall. I think he is. That's why I think there's a very good chance it's not going to be Joe Biden. So we have to be skating to where the puck is going, not just where it is. One step ahead. We can fall into the temptation of thinking the Democratic Party is as sillily stupid as Joe Biden appears to be on a given day. That's actually not the case. They're actually one step ahead, and I believe they are planning to replace Joe Biden quietly. And I think this is just one more step in leading us there for us to be prepared to really have a much more competitive race this fall than it appears at the margin.
Listen, I think it's definitely possible. I mean, you can't have somebody this cognitively compromised. By the way, a credit to this show. We've been pointing it out since the last election. And by the way, back then he looks lucid and with it compared to where he is today. The decline has been that significant. We've shown people the tape. If you believe that, then who is likely to replace him?
Look, I think they have a major Kamala Harris problem because this is a party that has tied its very identity to identity politics. She only got the job, let's be very honest, because of her race and gender. I know you're not supposed to say that, but it's the truth. And so if they're going to move Joe Biden out of the way, but they don't want Kamala Harris in that seat.
Democratic identity politics. That's
absolutely.
That is a known fact.
That's the core. And they know that Kamala Harris cannot be the nominee. And so they have to have somebody who checks off one of those identitarian boxes. So that's why I think it's not going to be Gavin Newsom, whether it's Michelle Obama to Hillary Clinton to somebody else. It has to be somebody who checks off their temple of identity politics box. But I do think that is where we're headed. And it's important for Republicans not to be complacent. Right now, President Trump would run laps around Joe Biden. This could be a Reagan-style landslide. You look at that survey of independent voters and that focus group that tells you the same story I am seeing across this country, which is precisely because why I believe they're going to actually change it to someone other than Biden by the time we get to this summer.
Okay. Now, I have no reason not to believe David Axelrod, but he was pretty strong in his statement saying Michelle's not running. Okay. That then brings up the Gavin Newsom issue. I've interviewed him. I have pressed him. I pressed him in the debate with Governor DeSantis on the issue of if he'd run. He's been very clear that he's not next in line, that the person that would be next in line would be the Vice President Harris. Okay, so how do you push her out of the way and maybe go to Gavin if he would take it? I'm taking him at his word that he said he really wouldn't take it. Then you got to look at Gretchen Whitmer. It's interesting that they are pushing out a book, is my understanding, over the summer. That seemed to be kind of spontaneous. You think maybe she's been talked to or spoken to by people?
Well, the reality is even Hillary Clinton is now lightly criticizing Joe Biden. God knows she wants the job. I don't necessarily take David Axelrod at his word. I do think that it may not even be Michelle Obama's choice. The idea that just because she doesn't want to run doesn't mean they're going to make her the nominee, I think are two separate and different questions. But whatever it is, Sean, this is our moment to get ahead of that curve, not to play a guessing game. I think the Republicans right now have an opportunity to own the message of national unity. Seal that border. Democrat or Republican, most Americans agree on its importance. Black or white, man or woman, it doesn't matter. We agree. Nations have borders. Merit beats DEI. That we got to drill more, frack more. Own the actual issues that allow us to unite this country. And the more we get ahead of that curve, the more we say that we own the message of national unity. Not Joe Biden, who claimed to unite the country, but we, the Republican Party, do to make America great again. We have to make America one nation again. That America First includes all Americans. The more we embrace that message in advance, the less it matters if it's Michelle Obama or Hillary Clinton or anybody else. So I'm not a believer of waiting for the other side to make their decisions and then responding. Let's set our own agenda, national unity as our own message. I think Donald Trump has the ability to deliver on that. And that way, either way, he will be victorious this fall, as I am keen to make sure we accomplish.
I mentioned the nearly 10 million unvetted Joe Biden illegal immigrants coming from our top geopolitical foes, tens of thousands of them from these countries. And Biden and even Mitt Romney find their comments repulsive. Biden saying that House Republicans should reject Trump's dangerous, quote, un-American pro-Putin stance on Ukraine. No, it's not a pro-Putin stance to say that this is the biggest national security threat, your wide open borders that is allowing people from Iran, Egypt, Syria, Afghanistan, China, and Russia into the country. Sorry, secure the border, get your budget in balance, then we can talk about aid. First, I talk about Israel. Ukraine already got $75 billion. And we cannot be fighting a proxy war with Vladimir Putin and Russia unless maybe we want Russia to get more aggressive. That is a potential outcome also.
Well, look, I think that we are marching closer to World War III than we ever have been in my lifetime, driving Russia further into China's arms, which unfortunately nobody in either party is really talking about. But you're right. The top threat we face is the invasion, and I will call it that, the invasion at our own southern border. If that disaster can happen on October 7th in Israel, it could happen right here at home in the United States of America. And God forbid we learn that the hard way. So this should not be a Democrat versus Republican issue. And this idea that we need a new law, Sean, is also a farce. Remain in Mexico is currently technically the law of the land. You just have Biden and Mayorkas refusing to actually enforce the law. So that's where I want to see Republicans in both the House and the Senate actually stand with a spine to say that it's not just how much more money you send to the border. It is a demand that as table stakes for even having any other discussion about foreign aid, we have to make sure we are enforcing the laws that are already on the books. We don't need new laws. We need a new president who actually enforces the law. That's not Joe Biden. It's going to be Donald Trump. But until then, Republicans have to make that demand of this administration enforcing the law before there's even a conversation about any foreign aid package. That's where we need to go.
Yeah. Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you for being with us as always. We have a new poll tonight. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.